Hello, hello. Welcome to Dr. Bingo Fairmont's Management Minute. Today, Dr. Fairmont is stuck, unfortunately, in a 12-hour University Senate meeting. So, in his place, me, Russell Clayton, and Adam Shoemaker, we like to call him Dr. Shoe around here, coming to you from the St. Leo University Donald R. Tavia School of Business. Shoe, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, Russell. I'm glad I didn't have to be in that full 12 hours of the university.
Yes, you were in for 11 and a half?
I was.
Excellent. All right, well, let's jump in. Tell me about the smallest company that you have ever worked for other than being a sole proprietor.
Yes, you know what? I used to work for my dad, who was kind of an unlicensed contractor when I was in high school. And I would
unlicensed contractor?
Yeah, well, but he had a little business. He was a teacher, a little summer business, painting and doing some light construction work, and I used to help him out with that. So that was a pretty small operation. He had about 5 or 6 guys.
So you did most of the electrical wiring in a bunch of buildings that are probably going to burn down soon.
Stay away from the stuff that you really need a license for. He stayed away from electrical, and plumbing, he said, was the worst. Because electric, you can always turn it off, but the plumbing, if you don't get it right, it's going to be a wreck. So he stayed away
and poop.
He stayed away from those skilled jobs, yep.
Now, what's the largest company you've ever worked for?
You know, I think the largest, I won't say the name of it, but it was a telecommunications company, and it rhymed with Horizon.
Oh.
And I used to work in their national HR department and worked on all kinds of programs that had to be sent out to the different district HR chiefs and things like that. But
you were
it's a good place to work, but big, so much different.
Yeah.
So much different than working for Dad.
You were so cryptic about that I'll never figure out where it was that you worked.
It's a secret. But anyway, what about you, Russell? What was the smallest company you ever worked for and the largest company?
Yeah, in high school and then while I was in my first year in college, which was at a community college, I worked for Snowbiz.
That's the snow cone place.
The snow cone place.
Okay, yeah.
So it's both the smallest in terms of employees and in terms of square footage that I've ever worked for. There were only 5 employees, and there were, in the building was 10 by 10 square feet.
Were you ever all in there at the same time?
Not all 5 of us, but
meeting?
there were 3 or 4 of us in there at a time.
It's pretty tight.
It was very tight. Good thing I weighed about 40 pounds less back then.
It was all those snow cones.
That's right.
Well, what about the largest company?
Largest, I'm going to have to say it actually may be St. Leo.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It may be the largest amount of employees. When you tie in all the people we have at the centers and the call centers, it's probably the largest company I've worked for.
Okay. Well, it's a good place to be then.
You got it.
Well, what does all this have to do with today's topic?
Well, today we're going to talk about some cultural growing pains, and we're not talking culture as in national culture. We're talking culture as in organizational culture, which I know is something that you and I both like to talk about in our classes.
Oh, yeah.
Because culture has so much to do with what actually happens and doesn't happen in businesses. And now one thing you wanted to talk about today is what happens when a small business becomes not so small. What happens to their culture?
That's a great question. And you know what? This is something that came up in a discussion with our sound engineer, Sean Gibbons, and he said, there's issues when companies are small and they have this mom and pop culture, and then they grow beyond sort of their means, not financially. That's another whole issue. We can talk about all the different reasons why it's hard to transition from a small business to a medium size, or what it means to be a small business. But aside from the production and the costs and the overhead and being connected and all that, what about the culture? What happens when you change the size of your organization and you want the culture to stay where you were rooted? How do you do that?
Because you go from, say, 10 people to 100 people to 1,000 people.
Right.
And it's hard to maintain that culture, that feel.
Absolutely. And so maybe not surprisingly, we know this because we talk about it in our classes, but a lot of people are surprised to find out, and this is according to the U.S. Small Business Administration, that about 99.7% of U.S. businesses are small businesses, or what they consider small businesses, which is under 500, but that's still a pretty good sized company.
Sure.
And small businesses employ about half of the workforce.
Yeah.
And then firms that have less than 100 employees employ about a third of the workforce. So most of the people in this country, or a good number of them, are working for a small company rather than a multinational with thousands and thousands of employees.
Right.
Yeah. But so what do we do? And I looked at some research on this and some thinking on this. There's lots of people talking about this, and I tried to distill down, if I could, some of the best ideas that I saw out there. One of the first ones that I saw was you need to make sure that your culture is strong and specific to begin with, right? It can't be something where you say, oh, we love our customers,
Right.
or we're the customer-focused business. That's not specific enough. You obviously want it to be something measurable. So when I think about like the Seattle fish market and they say, oh, make the customer's day. Well, what does that mean?
Right.
How do you know if you have made their day? And maybe what your culture needs is to be more specific before you get big, where you say something like, you know what, it's not about making their day so much as it is doing what it takes to get the customer to come back again.
Right.
Shop in our store or shop on our site or whatever it is.
So it almost sounds like you're advocating for almost like a SMART goal for the culture.
SMART goal,
being
absolutely.
specific.
Yes,
yeah.
indeed. Measurable and specific.
Makes
for
sense.
Sure, for sure. The other thing is, and this is something that we both agree on, is you really have to take the time to hire for culture.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously, you want people who have the skills and who have the job ability, but if you don't look for people who fit the firm, you're going to lose out. And you might be tempted when you're growing and business is coming in left and right and to say, well, we need somebody else to just come in here and handle this. But it's a real mistake, I think, to hurry that decision and get somebody who's not the right fit. Because either they're not going to work well with the team or they're going to leave pretty quick because they don't fit.
And and what it sounds like what you're talking about is what we in the nerdy academic literature refer to as PO fit. Person organization fit.
You got it.
And you are exactly right. When that person organization fit isn't there, it leads to that turnover, which ranges anywhere from 10,000 to 50,000 per employee to replace, based on various numbers. You've got job dissatisfaction, so people that can't leave, they're stuck.
Right.
They're not going to perform well. So there's all sorts of negative outcomes to this lack of PO fit. So you're exactly right. Hire for culture.
And culture and PO fit are important all the time. But I think it's easy to let that fall by the wayside when you have an organization that's growing beyond its means and it needs just warm bodies to get the work done.
Right.
These ideas both come from an article I read on Inc. From the Young Entrepreneur Council, and we'll put a link to that in our website, so you can take a look at that if you want to. The other thing, one of the other sources I read said you need to make sure that you're highlighting the linkages among your staff. So you have a lot of what we even here at St. Leo call silos of excellence, right? You have people who know how to do their job and they do it, and now the company's growing, and there's other people who need to be involved in decision making, and there's a tendency to say, well, I can do it all myself. I don't need to get anybody else involved. And you really lose out when you do that. So you need to make sure that people know who they should go to, who should be kept in the loop, and who they can get to support them when they're doing whatever particular task it is.
Yeah. An interesting note, I got an auto response from one of our colleagues today that said, this is, in short, said, hey, this is a busy time of year, graduation's coming up, and it gave this laundry list of who to go to.
That's nice.
If it's a faculty issue, contact this person. If it's a payroll issue, contact that person. That's exactly what you're talking about. Know who to go to.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt to reiterate that. Pretty frequently, especially if the company's growing. And people are saying, hey, new faces and new responsibilities and things like that. Okay, and that came from Eric Flamholtz in thebalance.com, and we'll make sure to put the link on there for you. And then the last idea that I found, and this was repeated across several of the sources, was you need to communicate with your staff, right? Communicate with them and follow up. And what I mean by that is not just give lip service to say, hey, we want to know what people think. Don't be that kind of company that asks people what they need, or what they think, but then doesn't actually give it to them or doesn't actually follow through with getting them the resources.
That's
that they
extremely
want.
demotivating to the employees to go through that. And it's just rude.
Well, but it happens a lot, right?
Right.
So you'll have an employee satisfaction survey or a suggestion box or whatever, and it just goes into a black hole.
Right.
And you're never really sure if anybody's looking at that or if any changes are going to be made because of that. And that's not the kind of thing you want when your company's trying to grow.
Exactly.
And that comes from Jason Richmond in business.com. We'll put the link on there for you as well.
Excellent.
So, listen, if Dr. Fairmont were here, what do you think he would say about this whole situation?
I think one thing he would say is that pretty much everything that you just mentioned, these great points from the research that you found, comes down to being consistent and having clear communication. In the small company, it's easy to just, go right next door and say, hey, shoo, this is what we need to do, or help me with this or that.
Right. You shout down the warehouse, hey, let's get some more of this.
Well, I was even thinking Morse code by tapping on the wall. Yeah, exactly. As the company grows, you can't do that. And even if the company grows such that it expands geographically, that creates a problem. So I think he would have to say, hey, make sure that communication is there.
Yeah, and a lot of people get annoyed by that. I get 60,000 emails a day, and some of them say the same thing, and you keep reminding me of this, and it's just frustrating.
Yeah, it's striking a balance. That too much communication can be a problem, but
a whole lot better than no communication.
No communication. I would rather, personally, I'd rather be over-informed than uninformed.
You're right. Well, we're going to sign off, and we're looking forward to our next podcast topic. Don't forget our website is managementminutepodcast.wordpress.com. You can follow us on Twitter at Bingo Fairmont, and we're on Facebook as Dr. Bingo Fairmont's Management Minute. And you can always email us at bingofairmont@gmail.com. Thank you to St. Leo University, the Donald R. Tapia School of Business. Our intro and outro music comes from bensound.com. And of course, our engineer and researcher is Sean Soundman Gibbons.
Yes, sir.
And if you see Dr. Fairmont, get him out of that Senate meeting if you can. Tell him that we're looking for him.